So throughout our life, we all experience some kind of realization. When we are a baby, we have to figure out what's going on in a kind of blurry way because the eyesight isn't fully formed. And then we start seeing the face and so on. But there's a realization that the closeness that a baby has to the mother is there given a kind of shape and a form. It becomes a huge learning experience. And actually, a baby spends most of its time sleeping. In other words, most of its time is in Tamas. And so naturally, as it grows, it becomes more active. And along with that comes the realization of its own identity, self-awareness. So all along our journey that we call life, we have a series of realizations which become openings up to what seems to be truthful. What is truthful? Truthful is the thing where there is no second contradiction. It is enduring. But it falls into two categories. One is the relative category, the relative truths, and we are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. And we have to understand that it is produced by something called Maya. What is Maya? Maya is a paradoxical thing which says, well, on the one side, things are changing and impermanent. We deem them to be permanent, and we deem them to be unchanging. We think that a life is fixed. We think that we will never die. And along with that, of course, we have death all around us. So when it comes to good fortune, we think, well, we are lucky to be alive. Other people are unlucky because they all fall off the train. And we remain on the train. That's not exactly correct. So in order to understand realization, we have to understand the relative reality, the relative realization that we learn all the time and are continuing to learn. And the addition to that will be modern science, where we realize that the universe is vaster than we thought it was. We realize that the universe has different component elements to it. We realize that we can't see everything with our own human instruments. We have to use specialized instruments to do that. And so this is a form of realization. The other kind of realization, of course, will be of an enduring kind. That is the realization of where it all starts from. The realization that there is something permanent, something enduring, if you like, behind all of this thing that is changing. It is the changeless. It is the oneness which is there. And we can see this by example. And the Upanishads give us so many different approaches for us to realize this one single thing. Once we realize it, all our doubt is gone, all our fear is gone. And we no longer have to say, may all beings be happy, may all beings be peaceful, because we understand the may, we, is a kind of from a relative point of view. And when we say, may all beings, it is paving the way to this realization. So there's another question that arises in connection with this, and that is, what is the difference between compassion and attachment? Now this question arises actually in the Gospel of Ramakrishna, and it is worth having a look at, seeing what Sri Ramakrishna has to say about this, the Master has to say about it. He says, remember that, he says, Daya means compassion, and Maya, attachment, are two different things. Now don't forget, when we talk about the relative realities, so the relative truths, this world in short, our experience in short, our field of activity in short, it is all actually a production of conditions which allow us to be deluded into our attachment to it. if you ask why is that so, why is God playing a trick like this, we also have to understand that there's only one reality. That realization also must dawn. If we go along thinking that spiritual endeavor or any endeavor is to complete something which is incomplete. So we think, well, maybe we'll have peace in the afterlife, or maybe we'll have peace in certain conditions. If only we lived in the mountains, if only we lived in a place where there was always peace, there were no wars. Supposing that. So that kind of way of thinking assumes that life is incomplete, and that there is always a supposing somewhere, and there is always a place we can go to where fulfillment will take place. But there are no conditions like that, because wherever we go, we find these three components of Maya. And as I mentioned before, three ingredients are there. The inherent hiding, the inherent hidden element. The truth is hidden from us. When it is removed, it is called realization. But not only is the truth hidden from us, but on top of it is a projection of the world with all its colorful names and forms and shapes, with people and places and events, a buzzing marketplace of activity. And we are involved in that, and we relate to that, and we try to struggle and try to make our way through that. But then if we shift our understanding, what does the Upanishads do? What does Scripture do? What do teachers do? They help us to shift our point of view, shift our understanding. Why would we want to do that? Because if we're looking for happiness and peace, and if we're looking for the greatest conditions, the ideal conditions, pristine conditions, if we're looking for an absolute of something, absolute peace, absolute happiness, absolute joy, then it's very clear whatever method we're using is not working. If it was working, we wouldn't still be looking for that. So at some stage or other, the realization must dawn. Perhaps everything is full and free. Perhaps perfection is already there. Perhaps peace that we're looking for is already here. It is already here, underlying all the varying fragmented activities, like a kaleidoscope of colors and forms and names and events and issues, some of which are general and much of which is personal. And it's the personal where we say my mind, a field where we can either elevate the mind or bring it down. 6th chapter on meditation, Bhagavad Gita tells us we can raise it up or we can bring it down. Now coming back to this one question that is asked. So what is the difference between attachment and compassion? And what is the cause of our attachment? It is this Maya. It is this delusion that hides the truth, that projects something as if a film is projected on a screen, and also that neutralizes it all, makes everything calm and peaceful. All of this is Maya. And don't think that Maya is a cruel joke, because the only explanation for Maya is it's a sport. Therefore, we should take a sporting attitude toward it. So I try to emphasize that in today's thought and prayer. If we take this world as a kind of laborious duty, then what is the characteristic of our mind? It is all be strain, struggle. All these words are like that. And you're quite right in your question. The world seems to emphasize that, because the world is under the influence of Maya. That is very simple. What is realization? We'll come back to it. Realization is the realization that this world is not bad. This world is not a struggle. This world we can see from the point of view of where God sees it, when God biblically says that God made the world and saw that it was good. So we don't see it like that. Why don't we see it like that? Because we are brought up in a negative environment. We're brought up with the feeling that life is opposed to us. We have to struggle. We have to survive at all costs. And that is why we have the natural selection inserted into evolution and all those things. Struggle, survival of the fittest. This is the language that is being used. Because the realization that it is not like that has not dawned. Anyway, we continue with the question about compassion and Maya, attachment. Attachment are two different things. Compassion is one thing. Attachment is another thing. Attachment means the feeling of minus towards one's relatives, as an example. The things that are close to us. It is the love one feels for one's parents, one's brother, one's sister, one's wife, and children. And we can extend it and say, for our culture, attachment toward our culture, attachment to our nation, attachment to our life, attachment to our body. It is the love one feels for one's parents and so on. Compassion, on the other hand, compassion is the love one feels for all beings of the world, hence the prayer, may all beings. I'm adding that. May all beings be happy, may all beings be peaceful, is within the scope of Maya, no doubt, because we're still dividing things up. We're taking the oneness and making it all fragmented. Even so, acknowledging that, why would we wish well for others? Is it not out of this daya or compassion? Compassion is the love one feels for all beings of the world. It's not just a sentiment. There's a love that is there for all beings of the world. And quite rightly, all beings is an all-inclusive thing. So we have to look at the whole generalized totality, all beings being there, and we have an idea of us, our inclusiveness and all that from a position of separateness. A good exercise can be done. So very often I insert it into the meditation practice. We imagine that what you consider to be the sitting person is sitting in front of you. You being the observer, a disembodied kind of nebulous cloud-like thing, looking with just an invisible pair of eyes, looking at a comical character in front of you. In my case, a white beard, glasses, graying hair and so on, thinning hair, like that, ears on either side, and arms hanging east and west, and the body facing in a certain direction. Something like that. And we can imagine now that we are showering flowers of blessings of that, and all those associated with that, and all those associated with that expanded to a region, to a country, to an earth, and then to a whole galaxy. After all, what we see as a body is only made from stardust. All the elements coming from the belly of a supernova, an exploding star. So if you view it like that, you'll get the understanding, oh, all beings includes that thing as well. Then you see, it is an attitude of same-sightedness. If you see anywhere an instance of compassion, and then he mentions Vidyasagar, who is known for his philanthropic works, know that it is due to God's grace, divine grace. Through compassion, one serves all beings. Maya also comes from God. Actually, Maya is the relative aspect of the Supreme. Through Maya, God makes one serve one's relatives and so on. But one thing should be remembered. Maya keeps us in ignorance and entangles us in the world. whereas daya, compassion, makes our hearts pure and gradually unties our bonds. God cannot be realized without purity of heart. What is realization? Realization is when there is complete purity of the heart. Heart means mind. How do we get this purity of this heart, of this mind? We do it by, first of all, acknowledging this oneness everywhere. Without acknowledging the oneness, true compassion cannot be there. True love cannot be there. You know, when you come across somebody who is unloving, somebody who is critical, somebody who is out to get you, somebody who is aiming at you, they don't realize they're aiming at themselves because there's only oneness. The realization of this oneness may not come all of a sudden. It can come in fits and bursts. It can come when you least expect it. It can come when you're sitting wondering what is life, or even when you're wondering, how is life so difficult for me at the moment, and all of a sudden a realization could dawn. A realization of that could happen in meditation. A realization could happen when you are walking in so-called nature. We should never forget we are part of this nature, walking there in an atmosphere which is inherently what we desire, namely peacefulness, beauty, goodness, harmony, birds singing, the ground fresh, the air fresh, living entities, all with the spirit, trees, flowers, ferns, all with a non-standard configuration to make it beautiful. If it was all the same, like a factory production, we wouldn't see the beauty of it. But we have a built-in inherent sense of aesthetics, and we use that inherent sense of aesthetics, sense of beauty, in order to clean and clarify the mind and make it also beautiful. When we see some beauty, we get beauty. It's not like somebody said, beauty is in the mind of the beholder, the eye of the beholder, get it out with objects. Not like that. There's an inherent sense of aesthetics within us. Then he continues. One receives divine grace, God's grace, by subduing the passions, lust, anger, and greed. These are the three categories. Then one sees God. I tried many things, he says, in order to conquer lust. When I was 10 or 11 years old and lived in Kamarpuka, says he, I first experienced samadhi. That is a realization. There are certain characteristics of God vision. One sees light, feels joy, and experiences the upsurge of a great current in one's chest, like the bursting of a rocket. What is realization? Here is very graphically described. We'll repeat it. One sees light, feels joy, experiences the upsurge of a great current in one's chest, like the bursting of a rocket. We are pretty surely guaranteed that every human being has experienced something like that. And maybe it's not enduring, maybe we don't notice it, maybe we attribute it to something else. If you have that as a permanent feeling, then this is called realization. The realization that this world is fleeting, that when I purify and clarify the mind through spiritual endeavor, the clues and methods are provided by scripture and teacher, and then we practice. And in the beginning, practice could be a kind of a struggle because we still have the mindset, I have to go and achieve something. As long as we have that mindset, we don't realize the reality of this totality which is here. And so realization may not be that profound samadhi experience. Realization of a different kind could be, aha, yes, I understand. And that could simply be understanding the principle of it. And then as we practice more and more, we see, aha, yes, it's true. Aha, it's true, it's true, it's true. And so we find this gradual realization, the same realization in a way that a baby had when they see the blurry face of a mother or blurry face of people using extremely strange language such as cuckoo, coo, ooh, ooh, and so on and so forth. And a baby doesn't know any difference, but in hindsight, it might look back and think, why are these people speaking like that, And then they feel how a baby explores with the sense of the mouth and the texture of something, and the sound of something. They may, use a rattle and shake it and hit themselves. That's another realization. So there's a realization that occurs all the time, but just to summarize, of two types. A realization about the relative world. That should be followed by a realization that it is Maya. That should be followed by a realization I can get out of it by using Maya, by elevating the mind, and by cultivating a sense of oneness that gives me a sense of compassion and love. And when that happens, my mind becomes purified, and that leads to another realization, the realization of this oneness which is there. So that's called realization. It goes on. No, he ends on that. But before that, an interesting discussion occurs as well. Once, this is M who is relating Mahendranath Gupta, he says, once Vidyasagar said in a mood of pique, what's the use of calling on God? Just think of this one incident. On one occasion, historically, Genghis Khan plundered a country and imprisoned many people. The number of prisoners rose to about 100,000. And the commander of his army said to him, Your Majesty, who will feed them? It is risky to keep them with us. It will be equally dangerous to release them. What shall I do? Genghis Khan said, well, that's true. What can be done? Well, have them all killed. The order was accordingly given to cut them to pieces. Now, God saw this slaughter, didn't he? Says Vidyasagar. But he didn't stop it in any way. Therefore, I don't need God. Even if he exists, I don't derive any good from him. Now, this is related to a kind of sub-question, We are brought up with all this negativity. Why? Well, we see all this difficulty around, and negativity will lead us to a position of atheism. I don't need God. If God can tolerate all of this, there's a very common argument that was used here in the 1880s and is still being used today. And we still are inclined to believe it because we see all kinds of difficulties in the world. Now, the difficulties, or the outlook on the difficulties, comes from our very childhood. And that comes out in a kind of distorted theology that developed in the Christian world and so on, that life is intrinsically sinful. We are intrinsically sinful. We are born like that. We are inherited like this. And so we can only be saved by an external entity called God. And that external entity comes as God's Son. The Word becomes flesh, dwells amongst us, and gets crucified, tortured for our sin. And then guilt ensues. So this is called original sin. But you see, psychologically, as I point out often, is actually an original wound. And the child has an original wound. Anyway, if we take that negativity that we are born worthless and that life needs to be improved by an external thing, then every doctor on the planet would take this understanding. You go to a doctor, what's wrong with you? That's the first statement. What's wrong? What are your symptoms? In other words, I'm a corrector. I'm a professional corrector. You go to a psychologist. What's wrong? On the basis that you are defective in some way and I'm a corrector. And then we give that to our children as well. Children, well, you need correction all the time. All the time you need correction. Never mind about praise. Let's correct you, correct you, correct you. A certain type of personality will be a professional corrector. Well, if that's your attitude toward life, then the Lord will give you countless things to correct. A good complaining at the end and saying, well, you didn't give me realization. No, you asked for correction. I gave you many things to correct. You wanted a workshop like that, and I gave you many, many difficult, rusty old things to correct, many old cars to come, and there you are. You kept busy, I think. But did you get realization? No. So this attitude of the world is bad and we have to correct it, that has seeped through a whole societies historically for a long time, perpetuating the idea of sin and guilt and hopelessness and so on to those who are ignorant. Who is ignorant? All of us. If we weren't ignorant, then we would get this realization. What is the opposite of ignorance? Knowledge. What is knowledge? Realization of what is there, what is here. And so, what does Ramakrishna reply to this? Is it possible to understand God's action and his motive? He starts off like that. Then he goes on. He creates, he preserves, and he destroys. Can we ever understand why he destroys? I say to the Divine Mother, oh Mother, I do not need to understand. Please give me love for thy lotus feet. The aim of human life is to attain bhakti. Now, you'll find that Ramakrishna has this wonderful, wonderful capacity to talk to everyone, regardless, at every level. So he's emphasizing bhakti. As for other things, the mother knows best. I have come to the garden to eat mangoes. What is the use of my calculating the number of trees, branches, and leaves? He goes back to that story of people, academics, who went to explore a mango tree. And in their botanical understanding, they wanted to increase it. They counted the number of leaves eventually. And they saw one of their company was missing. He was the wisest. He was up the tree enjoying eating the mangoes. And so the moral of the story is it's better to eat mangoes than count leaves. And so we ask, why this, why that? Why did God make such a stupid world? Well, maybe it's not so stupid. That's the first thing. And maybe when we have developed our love for the divine, then that question falls away by itself. Because the closer we get to the divine, the smaller the world becomes for us. And all these questions fall away because the realization of the truth dawns, because bhakti is purifying our heart or our mind. He says, I only eat the mangoes. I don't need to know the number of trees and leaves. And then he goes on to that passage on daya, compassion, and attachment. So, what would we deem to be Maya? What exactly is Maya in a more detailed way? And when we see what it is, what the obstacle is that preventing us from realization, then that itself becomes a kind of realization. So, we've talked about the three components of Maya, that is the Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, and how we should Instead of straining and struggling, take it as a sport. Not understanding why there should be a sport. That's the meaning. Why should there be a sport? You don't ask that question. Say, it is so. Why should there be a match at Wimbledon, tennis match, where balls are being hurled and thrown at a component at only speeds that IBM computer understand? And why do people come and watch? Well, the purpose of a sport, the purpose of a drama, the purpose of a play is entertainment. But how can we be entertained by cruelty? So we have to take a sporting attitude ourselves. And that would be the game of guiding thought, using a sporting attitude. Then we experience delight in our own game. And the game is an internal game. Whenever we notice this tamas, this darkness, this dullness, this laziness of the mind, we say, okay, it is useful for sleep. But after sleep, then, you can't perpetuate it after waking. The sleepy attitude is not useful when you have work to do. So you go and do your work, and you do it actively. Then ask now, why am I doing this work? Much of the attitude of tiredness, much of the attitude of anxiety, or much of the attitude of coming home exhausted is because of anxiety. Tired thoughts give a tired body. So where does the motivation come from to do any kind of work? We analyze it properly, we need to get an income and so on, not just for ourselves, but for families. And that being the case, then we have this attachment. Attachment is part of Maya. It is good in its own right, but there's something better. Compassion is better. To have genetic love for one's own species, one's own family, well, every animal will have it. There's nothing special. A dog will have it. A cat will have it. Protect its own kith and kin, and protect its own property. But we are a little bit more sophisticated than that. We can transcend that basic feeling and be generous in a global way, in a cosmic way. Open the heart and be compassionate to all. That's a very rare thing. And yet we have the capacity for it. So cultivating that is dhyana. So Maya is simply a statement of fact. And when we are doing these activities, attachment, well, is that not catching us in the illusion or the delusion? Yes. So we then play the sport of elevating it further to sattva. And the more we do that, the more we shift that game, the more an awakening occurs, because the more the purity of the mind is there, the more we are saturating the unconscious mind, purity, ability, high values, then the more realization dawns on us. It may be at one point all of a sudden, or it may be a gradual thing. So what is Maya is a statement of fact. Our daily practical life in this dual world isn't possible without Maya. So don't think that we should get rid of Maya. Maya is useful to us. It is only through Maya that we actually get our realization. It's like removing a thorn, Ramakrishna's example, from a foot to use another thorn. And I always remember, I may have told you so many times, I was with a group in Kilkenny who were intensely studying this non-dualism. And the one person said, yes, we should definitely get rid of this Maya, as if Maya is your enemy. No, Maya, when properly used, is the divine grace, the divine itself playing the game and encouraging us, wanting us, please, don't allow the mind or the thoughts or attention to sink down, elevate it elevated to the next level, activity, and elevated to the next level, selflessness. The whole of realization is commensurate with the degree or the level of selflessness. Anyway, Maya is not a mystery. It's not exactly an illusion. It's just a statement of fact that things are not what they seem to be. And it doesn't take us very much examination to come to that understanding that things are not what they seem to be. And so science helps us out in this way. In an age of tremendous scientific development, we can take a clue from it. We can see that there are several equations of Maya, as we can put it like that. To scientific people, we can put it like that. To non-scientifically minded people, we can put it in a different way. We can say it is easy to see that this is a kind of a sport. Why should we view it like this? Because it's easy to see things change. It's easy to think that you change. And when you use that quote, yes, when we have this realization, our behavior changes. That's the evidence of it. And we don't say, well, we used compassion and now we have the realization we don't need compassion anymore. No, we spontaneously become more compassionate because we have a sight of oneness, a greater sense of the oneness and unity of existence itself. So we all live, we move, and we think, of course, in Maya. It's inexplicable in the extreme because Maya is described as what is making the impossible possible. Gatana, gatana, patiyasi is the saying. Under its spell, even an incarnation of God, such as, let's say, a Ramakrishna or a realized person, a Jesus, a Buddha, a Rama, Krishna, and so on, even an incarnation of God appears to forget the superhuman resplendence, behaves like an ordinary mortal. And so when for, let us say, 300 years or more, there was a debate among early Christianity about the nature of Jesus, all of the councils, pretty much, most of the councils anyway, and all of the discussions, and all of the agreements and disagreements, and all of the difficulties in understanding the nature of a Christ were all around this. He's a man and he's God. How does that work? He's divine and he's human. How does this work? And they came to a conclusion. Fully human, fully divine. That was the final theological conclusion adopted by all Christians, most Christians, other than the heterodoxical ones. And so, even an incarnation of God comes under this spell, as it were. Maya is responsible for the contradictions in our thinking and in our actions. You must have noticed contradictions. Good is inevitably followed by evil. It's just how it is. And yet we work to create only good, believing it will ultimately eliminate evil. And it will ultimately remove evil in this relative world. We have to always put that in. So we have to believe, or we do believe, naturally, in a progressive evolution of the universe. If people propose that there's a beginning of the universe, then we can see it in terms of an evolving thing. And so that is actually called Maya. What are we studying? What is modern science studying? Maya. That's all. No wonder they cannot understand it. It is inscrutable. And the cause determines the effect. Yet we want to accomplish good in order to end the bad. We look and we use bad to adjust it. We want to establish peace. Why? By making war. It's a contradictory thing, isn't it? So this is called Maya, a fact. A person robs his fellow man and gives his wealth in all kinds of philanthropical causes. Expecting eternal happiness thereafter in the afterlife is a delusion of Maya. Attachment without which no happiness is possible on earth creates bondage and brings more suffering. So the illusion that we can get pleasure or get the good through attachment actually binds us because it creates slavery. The opposite of that is realization. The realization that we can be free, the ability of being free is there. That's followed by the realization, we are free already. I don't know why we thought we were bound. It's because Maya gave us this and gave us for a reason to perpetuate the game. Why should there be a game in the first place? I say, don't ask that question. We accept it. Then if we accept it as a sport, we should play the game well. That means we do all our duty well. We do it with a great deal of joy. We do it with a detached understanding of it. And if we are bhaktis, devotees, an attachment to the divine, because all things are because of divine energy. This divine energy that gave us the thought, how can we get out of it also? See, when we go to this oneness of everything, all our difficulties just disappear completely and suddenly disappear. When we realize also the merit in it, then we embark on it in a more serious way. But serious doesn't mean we take all the joy away from it. Let's be serious and correct everything. No. Why don't we take it like with a sporting attitude? Elevate the mind to a position of joy and delight. Why don't we make it a pleasant series of scenes? Now everything comes to us in pictures, picture form. In the future, we can picture a kind of devastated world, nuclear world, if we choose. Of course, it's not real. It's just your imagination about it. Or we could make a picture of a bright world with everybody peaceful, everybody happy. You might say that sounds unrealistic. Or we might make a picture of this oneness of this divine, and even the preceding picture, make it the way God sat, using this kind of language, the way representation of language, beautiful pictorial language, that we can view the world in the same way that the divine viewed it and views it still. Because what we call the so-called world is just the manifestation of that one entity. And so another realization can be that was there emphasized. That is the Purusha Suktam, a beautiful poem that describes the entire cosmos as one, as a body. Where is the body of God? Can you see it? And where there's a body, there's a mind called cosmic mind. And every star is a jewel around the neck of the divine skin. And every flashing thing taking place in the universe is his glory expressed, his movement, his limbs. Every galaxy is simply his arms and legs moving. And every tree, you see, coming to the Upanishads, the pictorial way the Upanishads talk, the Vedas talk, every tree is a hair on his body. See, like that. So we get this idea by forming better pictures. And wherever somebody through careless speech tries to bring us down, the world is in a mess, etc., etc., we have to agree not to agree with them and say, well, it may seem like that, but you didn't understand Maya, probably. So, and point out all the wonderful things that we can observe. So a person may be stuck in a room, unable to move, and living a life which is an unusual kind of thing because of physical difficulties. But the mind, that's something different. Actually, the body comes from the mind, is manifested from our thinking. So we can learn to change our thinking at least, and not let the physical body rule. We can say, oh, okay, it's like that, but. And the wonder of the human body is not in its sickness, it's in its health. I think I've gone through it before. I picked it up from a Reader's Digest article many years ago, The Health of the Body, the wonder of the body, that a teardrop is effective as a germ killer, even diluted in a 20-liter bucket of water as a germ killer. Skin itself is a germ killer, otherwise your hands would fall off, bacteria would invade there, and no defense mechanism. The body is a germ killer. The skin is a germ killer. We have cilia there to take off anything that might be difficult in the swallowing process on the conveyor belt. And then there's in the digestive juices there, hydrochloric acid sits. Thousands and millions of billions of antibodies are sitting there ready, rallying, like troops rallying round to defend anything. And you say, oh, I have a difficult cough or something. Yes, the body is fighting something inside. And that's coming out. And the mucous lining is meant to be an assistance to us, not a nuisance to us. So we have a lot to be thankful for. And thankfulness really is the key. So be thankful for what you have. Count your blessings. That will immediately neutralize any negative thoughts. In short, neutralize all the negatives with positives. Make it a sporting game like that. And change your language and change your pictures, your mental pictures. Then that will purify the mind and realization will dawn, not just in an intellectual realization point of view, that's necessary, but also on a realization is an experiential thing. On an experiential level, you can realize it. I don't know if I answered your question. Don't say what a pity, say what a glory.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.